Redfall is one of the worst games of 2023, a game that has so many fundamental issues and bugs that it really makes you question how did Bethesda not understand that this was going to be poorly received, because on OpenCritic and Metacritic it's getting absolutely ravaged. Right now the game has a 61 out of 100 on OpenCritic, with only 18% of critics recommending the game. PC Gamer gave it a 44, Games Radar a 2.5 out of 5, Metro a 6, GameSpot a 4, and then on Metacritic it has a 57 out of 100 on PC and a 1.9 users score. And then the Xbox Series X reviews are pretty much the same story. IGN even published their own review the other day. They had a bunch of pre-release coverage, and they ended up giving the game a 4 out of 10, calling it bad. Redfall is a bafflingly bad time across the board, plagued with bland missions, boneheaded enemies, and repeated technical problems. Redfall simply wasn't ready for daylight in this state, and that is been my experience. I played it for a couple of hours and I absolutely hated it, and I will now move on. Not something I do very often, but the brain dead AI, which was a problem with Deathloop, is very noticeable here. The repetitive mission structure just is not an enjoyable time. So there have been a lot of questions being pointed at Xbox and Bethesda. And one thing is, with Bethesda, multiplayer does not make a good combination. Wolfenstein Youngblood, that was a disaster. Fallout 76 has had a lot of issues, and well, here we are with Arkane's Redfall. This was probably a project that was approved around the same time that those projects began, and I just have to really question what Bethesda's old management was thinking, and why Xbox really didn't intervene better here. And ultimately, the chaos surrounding this new first-party release for Xbox has sparked a lot of conversation about the state of Xbox, a conversation that feels like it's been ongoing for the last decade, since the beginning of the Xbox One era, where everything that could go wrong went wrong. We obviously had Lionhead being shut down, Fable Legends was cancelled, Scalebound, that was a huge disaster for Xbox. The Halo IP has been falling apart for the last number of years, with just a number of issues that have emerged with 343, and now we look to the future and there's just so many question marks. Obviously we have tons of games in development, from Everwild, Fable, Perfect Dark, Avowed, Contraband, Indiana Jones, State of Decay 3, Hellblade 2, and the list goes on and on. Many of these projects were announced years ago, but we have no idea where they are and when we're actually going to see them, and most of them we have not actually seen any gameplay. We've just seen cinematic CGI trailers, and then we've heard rumors and reports of chaos and development hell happening with projects like Everwild and Perfect Dark. And that is why all attention right now is on Bethesda Starfield, the next huge AAA high-budget game that is going to be first-party for Xbox. That needs to be a home run. That is a conclusion that lots of pundits, including myself, have come to, and I think a lot of people don't understand why this needs to be a home run, because if this ends up being another dud, another mess, I think that this really signifies that there needs to be a huge leadership shakeup. I'm not sure if that means Phil Spencer needs to step down, but I do think somebody under him, whoever's in charge of first party, maybe that be Matt Booty, somebody has to go, something has to change, because what they've been doing, it's not working. Now, Phil Spencer did discuss this in a recent interview from Kinda Funny. He also talked about Redfall, the disappointment with that, and he also talked about his optimism with the pipeline ahead and the pressure that is on Starfield. It's a very honest look at the state of Xbox from Phil Spencer. I'm actually very happy that he did this interview, but there are many quotes that he makes here that are eye-opening and also kind of concerning.
There's nothing that's more difficult for me than disappointing the Xbox community, and just to kind of watch the community lose confidence, be disappointed. I'm disappointed. I'm upset with myself. I kind of revisit our process. You know, I think back to the announcement of 60 frames per second, and then we weren't shipping 60 frames per second. That was kind of our punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple weeks ago.
I mean, the thing is just, I don't understand how nobody at Xbox or Bethesda didn't see how much of a mess this was. Paul Tassi has this in quotes, and he also comes to a conclusion that I have come to. He says, "One thing I'll fight," this is what Spencer said, "is what went wrong. There's clear quality and execution things we can do, but one thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. They didn't hit their own internal goals when it launched. I think it's maybe a little simplistic to say, if you would have just delayed it 3 months, the core creative of the game would have delivered on something that was different than it was. was. That's what Spencer goes on to say. And I agree with that. I don't think that they could fix the brain-dead AI in 3 months. This game probably needed another year or two. But this just ultimately points to Xbox needing to do a better job in a creative role, saying, hey, we need to get this right. And even beforehand, 6 months ago, Phil Spencer and his team, everybody at marketing was saying that, yeah, be excited for Redfall. We have seen everything. We've played it. It looks great. And I played it now, and I just don't know how anybody didn't see that this game was not going to be received well. And Paul Tassi says, it's kind of stunning to hear Spencer be this frank about the failures of the game, especially when 6 months ago he was saying they were going to be delayed until they could be launched in a great state. And again, there is lots of bugginess. There are a lot of issues with Redfall that just makes that remark specifically about launching games in a great state. It's like, what happened here? And I guess Spencer is saying that their systems failed, but I just feel like they had to have known that this was going to be a mess. Now, he does go on to talk about a lot of other things, and this is what his next remark was, and he talks about how, again, that he doesn't think that Arkane needs to make one style of a game or any other studio under them.
A lot of people will say, hey, you've got teams know how to do one kind of game, just force them to go do the one kind of game that they have a proven track record for. And I'm just not a believer in that. Maybe that means I'll underdeliver for some of our fans out there. But when a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded,
I mean, that is something that I totally agree with. I am fine with Redfall being made from Arkane. It's just the quality that's the issue. And again, I think there was an assumption that this was going to still be a very story-driven experience, and it's just not that. There isn't even any cutscenes. It's just pretty much still images that move, and then you hear a voiceover. That is not something that a lot of us expected. But again, that just goes back to the marketing and the communication that failed here.
I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability, push their aspirations. But I also need to have a great selection of games that are continue to come that surprise and delight our fans.
And that is perfectly fine. That is something that I think every Xbox fan understands. Obviously, Xbox wants to be a little different than Nintendo and PlayStation with variety. But the problem is that while PlayStation and Nintendo have maintained a high standard of quality, we have not seen that with Xbox. These 6 and 7s out of 10s, this has been the norm for the last decade, and that's unacceptable in my eyes, and it should be unacceptable for Phil Spencer and his team. And again, that has not changed, even with all these acquisitions, and that does have to change eventually, in my opinion. Next here, we do have Phil Spencer touch on how they expected Redfall to somehow be received a lot better than what it was received from critics and users and even myself.
We would never strive to launch a game that we thought was going to review in the low 60s. It's not part of our goals. If you look at our review scores over the last year, it's not a defense at all. If you look at the review scores over the last year, I think the teams have done a better job in upping the level of quality of the games that we've shipped. Some of those,
and that is the case. You can look to a Hi-Fi Rush as a great example of this, but again, it's these big AAA high-budget games that we haven't seen that high quality. I can look to a bunch of other low-level games like the Psychonauts 2, the Hi-Fi Rush. Those have all been excellent, but those aren't really on the scale that I'm thinking of, and that has been the problem for Xbox the last decade. Now, Phil Spencer also does discuss some of the remarks people have been making about him being fired. I just thought this was kind of funny considering what's been going on. Let's see, he discusses it right here.
Company to this category. When are we just going to push Xbox out of the market? There's a lot of Twitter firing of Phil right now, which is fine. I'm way overpaid for the role I have anyway, so I get that's my responsibility. But we will remain committed to the game and the players. As long as the players want to go play games.
And that's great to hear. And the reason why people are saying Phil Spencer needs to be fired, and again, I think I rushed to judgment with that one when I brought it up on Twitter. I think my post has the most likes actually even mentioning that. But it's just somebody needs to be held accountable, and there seems to be a lack of understanding who actually is accountable for this. And as Xbox head, all of this falls on Phil Spencer. And obviously, Redfall is an example of a game that began development and was approved even before Xbox purchased Bethesda, but still, they had a couple of years to have known that this was going to not be a very good game. And yet It wasn't communicated to players how much of a mess this was. That's why there was a lot of, let's just say, there was genuine excitement beforehand until we all got our hands on the game. Now, Phil Spencer does talk about the strong lineup. This is what I was talking about, in which he reaffirms that he thinks things are going to get better.
I can say now, and everybody can already stop, I don't want to hear what Phil has to say about the future, and I kind of fully respect that point of view, that we've got Starfield coming, we've got Forza coming, we've got Hellblade coming, like we've got collections of games. I'm seeing very good builds of Avowed and stuff. Like we're in, like I can see it, but until you have a controller in your hand and you're smiling from playing our games, none of my words should matter.
And that's well, he says it right there. We've always had this mentality of good things are coming with Xbox. It's always been Halo Infinite's going to be the savior of Xbox, just watch, and that didn't end up being the case. But again, it's just always been, let's look to the next year and hopefully things get better, and it just hasn't. Obviously, when I talk about the projects that are in development, I'm excited to play Fable and Avowed. I hope that they turn out to be great action RPGs, but again, we just haven't really seen those games actually in action. We haven't seen gameplay to form an actual opinion on it. Obviously, there is tons of potential with the studios behind these games, but again, it's just a waiting game right now. And at this current moment in time, Xbox just has not delivered, at least yet. Now, this is the final big clip that has been discussed a lot, and it's Spencer talking about how he's not competing with Nintendo, and he talks about how Starfield being an 11 out of 10 doesn't mean that people are going to be selling their PS5s, a point that I don't think I've heard anybody make, but Spencer makes here. This is what he had to say.
We're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution or win for us, and I know that will upset a ton of people, but it's just the truth of the matter is that when you're third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are and have in certain cases very discrete focus on doing deals and other things that will that kind of make being Xbox hard.
And that is a comment that is clearly being aimed at Sony, as they have been very vocal about their displeasure with the Activision Blizzard deal and the possibility of Call of Duty having problems in the future on the PlayStation 5 if Xbox owns Activision Blizzard. And then, not to mention, there have been leaked documents showing that PlayStation has made multiple deals with Square Enix to prevent games like Final Fantasy XVI from being on Xbox for long periods of time. But the thing is, Xbox has moved beyond just console. It's all about Game Pass as an ecosystem. It isn't about people necessarily buying an Xbox Series X. Obviously, they're still trying to get people to buy those consoles, but they just want people to jump in on PC or cloud. It's all about getting that subscription because, yes, Game Pass is the Netflix of gaming, and that is what Microsoft is building. That's why they spent $70 billion on Activision Blizzard. We'll see if that deal actually ever gets completed, but that is what they are fighting for. That is their future. It's not about moving console sales. And as Spencer's going to say, or I think he already did say, they lost this fight with the Xbox One, and I fully agree with that.
Our vision is that everybody who's on console has to feel like they have a great experience and they're a first-class citizen. They've invested a ton in our platform. But we are not in a position, and I see it out there, I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games. So when you go and you're building on Xbox, we want our Xbox community to feel awesome. But this idea that if we just focused more on great games on our console, that somehow we're going to win the console race, I think doesn't really lay into the reality of most people. Like 90% of the people every year who walk into a retailer to buy a console are already a member of one of the three ecosystems, and their digital library is there. This is the first generation where the big games that they're playing were games that were available last gen. When you think about Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, like the continuity from generation to generation is so strong. I see a lot of pundits out there that kind of want to go back to the time where we all had cartridges and discs, and every new generation was a clean slate, and you could switch the whole console share. That's just not the world that we are in today. There is no world where Starfield's an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5s. That's not going to happen.
I don't think that's a point that I've seen anybody make. Maybe there are some console fanboys, warriors out there making that, but I personally myself have not seen that. And yes, I do think it does make a difference if Xbox starts delivering great games. Obviously, it's not going to persuade people not to buy a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation 5 or sell those consoles, but it'll give them reason to actually jump into the Xbox ecosystem. If you want to be honest right now, for the last couple of years, I don't think that there really is a game that you can point to saying that this is a reason why you need to be subscribed to Game Pass or have an Xbox Series X. And just on the point with the Xbox Series X, we haven't really seen that game yet that has fully taken control or used the full power of the technology within that console. That's why you hear a lot of people saying, when are we actually going to see a next-gen game? A game that fully uses the power of the console. With PlayStation 5, they have Horizon and God of War Ragnarok, which really put that console to its fullest potential. And with Xbox Series X, that's why a lot of people are hopeful maybe Starfield will be that. And Phil Spencer during this interview does say that during June, when we have the showcase, they are going to fully commit to either 30 FPS or 60 FPS with that game. I'm going to assume it's probably going to be 30 FPS just because of Bethesda and their reputation and how other games have run in the past, but I don't really like what Phil Spencer said here. I understand that he again reconfirms that, yeah, they're not competing with Sony and Nintendo. That fight was lost years ago. They're committed to Game Pass. They're committed to making great games. But I think that Xbox is right now at a point in which having a huge AAA, high budget, big release, having it actually released to critical acclaim, it wouldn't hurt. It would be something that's definitely positive to have some news coverage and say that, hey, this is a game, this is why you want to be on Xbox, and we have not seen that, and that has to change eventually. And again, we've been waiting on that for 10 years. Xbox has made a series of moves which point to maybe that eventually happening, but it's a waiting game right now. But either way, this was a very eye-opening interview from Phil Spencer, who was very honest about a lot of the failures that they've had. And again, this is only a couple of days after the launch of Redfall. It's very surprising, the timing, but I'm very happy that he did this. I do, however, think that Phil Spencer did a great job at dodging some certain questions, especially on the pipeline that's in front of us, because, yeah, we have not seen gameplay. We have not seen release dates for many of these games. And again, in June, that is something that I think a lot of us need to and want to see. Every time we talk about these showcases, it's always like Xbox needs to do X, Y, and Z, and most of the time it doesn't actually happen. But this one more than ever feels like it has to happen now, because if Starfield ends up being a mess later this year, I just don't know how you look at 2024 and be excited for a game like Avowed and Fable, even if the gameplay looks impressive, because those concerns, those question marks are going to be in the back of my mind even before I put that control in front of me and start up whatever game it is. Anyway, like I said, great interview from Phil Spencer. I'm glad he did this. What do you guys make of it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or if you found any informative value, and consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I shall see you later.